I talk.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Yep. There we go. Appreciate it, Deacon.
All right, Dick. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom. All right, and shalom, shalom, shalom. Can everybody hear me? Just checking to see can everybody hear me? All right, cool, cool, cool. All right, shalom, shalom, everybody. I apologize for that. I got a kind of different setup, and yeah, I don't know what that was about, what happened, but I do apologize for the hold up. But anyways, so my name is Deacon Ernest James, and I'm with the King James Bible University, coming out of Durham, North Carolina. And today's teaching that we are going to be getting into is called Corruption of the Heart, Exalting One's Self. So today, my brothers and sisters, we're going to be looking at this corruption that can come from our own thoughts and our own mindset. So we want to understand that we cannot allow our own thought processes to dictate our decision making. Because when we looking at corruption is something that decays. It becomes ruined. It becomes polluted by something that it is influenced by. And that's what actually is causing the corruption. Such as with a flower or a plant or a tree. These are things that can become corrupted by an outside source that has influence on them, such as bacterial diseases, fungi, insects, or other environmental factors that can cause that plant to decay and become corrupted over time. These are the things that can cause issues to it. And then it starts to decompose or decay. But just as with that flower, that same thing can happen unto us, providing we allow things to come in and affect us and causes corruption to the seed that is within us. Even things such as our own wicked thoughts and things that goes on around us, the things that we allow to be an influence on our lives that does not align with the word of the Most High God. Because our own thoughts will cause corruption within us, providing we do not humble ourselves down to the word of God. And then eventually over time, we'll start to decay and become polluted in our own understanding if we're not careful. So we need to be sure that we are constantly and consistently checking ourselves. We being honest with ourselves, and we look deep within ourselves to see what's going on, because we don't want to let anything get past us. We have to be able to learn who we was made to be and not allow any outside influences to sway us from the path that we are on. So these are the things we have to understand. But remember, if there is anything that is within us that is corrupt, then understand those things are coming directly from the heart. Because whatever is in our hearts is what's going to reveal who we actually are and what we are truly about. So we're going to go ahead and get started with this teaching. We're going to start right here in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 7 and verse 29. And he says, lo, this only have I found, that God hath made man, male and female, upright, but they have sought out many inventions. So we can see clearly right here that God made man. So he made male and female upright, to be blameless, to be pure, to be faithful unto Jehovah's way. See, this is how we was made to be. This is how we was created. This is how we was formed and fashioned to be in this certain way. Just as a tree that's upright, it was made to be that way. But the only way it becomes corrupt is when something is defiling it. And these things come in and corrupt it. But most of the time, it's something, when it comes to us, most of the time, it's something that we come up with. Something that we do to our own selves, which are these inventions. The things that we conceive and come up with from within our own selves, from within our own imaginations, from within our own thoughts and intentions. These are the things that happen. So we're going to go over here. We're going to go to Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 19. And we're going to hit verse 21. And we're going to hit 21a up to the semicolon. Proverbs chapter 19, 21a. It says, there are many devices in a man's heart, in a male or female's heart. That's a full thought. So he's telling us there are many devices within man's heart. So we already know man is speaking of male and female, but this is also flesh because man is flesh. So these many devices are these inventions that we go and seek after, that's contained within our hearts, which we know the heart is the mind. It's our desires. It's our will. It's our reasoning. It's our faith and our belief. So we see how all of this is going. So within man, within flesh is many devices. And these things can cause corruption and wickedness within us. Why? Because we're going to see this over in Genesis. When we go to Genesis chapter 6, and we're going to hit verse 5, and then we're going to jump down. Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. And it says, and God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination, so every conception, every understanding of the thoughts of his heart, so his desire, his will was only evil continually. So it's only evil perpetually, endlessly. So this is a constant thing. Our thoughts that we conceive or imagine within us, meaning within our flesh, only produces more and more wickedness and corruption. And it's continual. It doesn't stop. It just continues to grow and grow. That's why a lot of times when we sit in there and these evil thoughts come to our mind and we don't know where it's coming from. But the more we think on these things that we shouldn't, it becomes continual. These things become endless thoughts of wickedness because it's from the heart. These are things that we actually conceive within ourselves. That's why we see this. When we go over here to James, we're going to let's hit James. We're going to hit James chapter 1. James chapter 1. And then we're going to go to verse 15. He tell you, it says, then when lust have conceived, it bringeth forth sin. So those evil thoughts. And when sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death, that separation from God. Because these are the things that are conceived within us, things that are desired, the things that are thought of. And we sit there and we allow these things to consume us. This is how we fall into corruption. So when we get back over here to Genesis chapter 6, now we'll hit verse 11 and verse 12. And it's telling us, it says, and the earth, the people, also was corrupt and before God, and the earth, the people, was filled with violence. And God looked upon the people, and behold, remember, it was corrupt. For all flesh had corrupted his way, his path upon the earth. So this is the point, because of these many devices that's found within the heart of man, within the mind of flesh, is nothing but continual corruption. Because Jehovah didn't fashion us this way. We already seen Jehovah made us to be upright, to be a reflection of his way. But when he looked upon the people, it was corrupted. It's corrupt. So we even gonna see what corrupt actually is in the spiritual dictionary. Because when we go over here, and we gonna go right to corrupt, and we can see this right here. Corrupt is telling us what? Change from original agreement. Change from original covenant. This is corrupt. It's a change from the original agreement. It's a change from the original covenant. That's what that is. So the thing is, there's nobody that can say that Jehovah made them to be corrupt, or made them to be wicked, or made them change from the original agreement. Because that would mean that he would have made us to be contrary to him. But we know that's not true. He made us to be upright. See, we made ourselves contrary to him. We corrupted ourselves, because that's what corrupt mean. To change from the original agreement. We changed from that. That's something that we did. That's why we can see this when we go over here. Because this was the agreement right here in Exodus chapter 19. And we're going to hit verse 5. And then verse 8. He tells us right here. He says, therefore, if provided you will obey my voice in deed, so in works, and keep my covenant, my agreement, then you should be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people. For all the earth is mine. Verse 8. And all the people answered together and said, all that the Spirit of God have spoken, we will do. And Moses returned the words of the people unto the Spirit of God. So this was the original agreement, obeying the instructions of the Spirit of God, keeping his covenant with him. Why? Because he made us upright. He fashioned us to be a mirror reflection of his way, because we was made in his image. And we were made to be holy, meaning separated, because he is holy. So can't nobody sit there and say, oh, I was already like that, or I was made this way. No, you made yourself that way. Any issues and problems that we have within ourselves, or anything that is revealed within us that is corrupted, we made ourselves like that, because those are those inventions and many devices that we come up with within our hearts. When we sit there and change from the original covenant, we change from the agreement. We alter our vow. We alter those oaths, which then what? Immediately leads to corruption. Because everything that the Spirit of God spoke right here in Exodus, everything that he spoke in Exodus applies to us today. See, it won't just for them back then. You might have some people that think, oh, that was back in Exodus. That applies to them. No, everything that was written during that time applies to us in this time. Why? Because this word is living. It's everlasting. Because God made a covenant with his people right here in Exodus. This same thing applies to us today. Each and every single one of us that are here that come from the children of Israel. We come out of the loins of somebody that was there back then when Jehovah made that covenant with his people. So everything that was spoken about back then, the same thing applies to us today. Why? Because his law is everlasting. And that law is supposed to be written in our hearts. That's passed down throughout our generations. We can see this. We're going to go over here to Jeremiah. Let's go to Jeremiah. We'll hit Jeremiah chapter 31. And we're going to hit 31 down to 37. Jeremiah chapter 31. And we're going to hit 31 down to 37. Go ahead and highlight it. Jeremiah 31 to 37. And it says, behold, remember, the days come, saith the Spirit of God, that I will make a new covenant. So this new covenant is just a familiar covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. not according to the covenant that I made with our fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage, which my covenant they break, although I was a husband unto them, saith the Spirit of God. Verse 33, but this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Spirit of God. I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts, so in their mind, in their desire, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall teach no more every man his neighbor, every man his brother, saying, know the Spirit of God, for they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith the Spirit of God. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. Verse 35, thus saith the Spirit of God, if heaven above can be measured, and the foundations of the earth searched out beneath, I will also cast off all the seed of Israel for all that they have done, saith the Spirit of God. Wait, I'm going to start right here at verse 35 again. It said, thus saith the Spirit of God, which giveth the sun for a light by day, and the ordinance of the moon and the stars by a light by night, which divideth the sea when the waves thereof roar. The Spirit of God of hosts is his way. Verse 36, if those ordinances depart from before me, saith the Spirit of God, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever. Thus saith the Spirit of God, wow, I just skipped the whole thing. Thus saith the Spirit of God, if the heaven above can be measured and the foundation of the earth searched out beneath, I will also cast off all the seed of Israel for all that they have done, saith the Spirit of God. So we see right here that these ordinances won't depart. Why? Because they are under the law of God. Because he tells us this. When we go over here to Matthew, we're going to go to Matthew chapter 5. Let's go to Matthew. Matthew chapter 5, and we're going to hit verse 18. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 18. We see this here. It says, for verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law to all be fulfilled. So we know nothing has passed away. That's why we can see that everything remains the same. That's why we see that sun coming up and down every day the same way. We see the moon continue to go through her cycles every month. The seasons will never change. That's why we can even see this when we go over here to Genesis. We're going to hit Genesis chapter 8, and we're going to hit Genesis chapter 8, and we're going to hit verse 22. And he tell us right here, it says, while the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. So we see that all these elements of things that we can see or experience, these things teach us something spiritually. But that's why we can always look back at Romans 1:20. But all these things are continual. These ordinances will never cease because this is Jehovah's law that he has set. These are his ordinances that he has set up and that he has established. These things will never change, nor will they be done away with. So when we get back over here to Jeremiah 31:36, it says, if providing those ordinances, providing those laws, those statutes depart from in the presence of me, saith the Spirit of God, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever. Which we already know that Jehovah's law is everlasting, and the thing established by his law shall never cease nor pass away till all things be fulfilled, just as the seed of Israel shall never cease from being a people. So we showing all this just to show that nothing changes from the beginning of the book to the back of the book. Jehovah's covenant does not change. Jehovah's agreement with his people does not alter because his laws and his statutes cannot be altered. So there is nobody that can say that this original covenant was just for them back then. Why? Because this is an everlasting covenant with his people from generation to generation. So regardless if we want to hold to the truth or not, It don't matter. If we can hold to the truth, or if we don't want to hold to the truth, it's not going to change. But we are still held under that responsibility for the agreement that we made. So let's go somewhere. Let's go over here to Psalms. Let's go to Psalms. We're going to hit Psalms chapter 105. Psalms chapter 105. Psalms 105, and we're going to hit verse 6 down to 10. Psalms 105, verse 6 down to 10. And he says, "O you seed of Abraham, his servant, you children of Jacob, his chosen. He is the Spirit of God, our guide. His judgments, his doctrines and teachings are in all the earth. He have remembered his covenant forever, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations, which covenant he made with Abraham, and his oath unto Isaac," because that was the promise, "and confirmed that same unto Jacob for a law, for ordinance, and to Israel for an everlasting covenant," an everlasting agreement. So these laws, these ordinances was given unto Jacob, but we know Jacob is the flesh, because Jacob is the supplanter. So we have to overcome the ways of the flesh to receive the Spirit, making us Israel, who are Jehovah's servants. That's who that everlasting covenant was made with. It wasn't made with the flesh, it was made with the Spirit. Not with the children of Jacob, but with Israel, Jehovah's servants. But that everlasting agreement with Israel, his true servants, is what it is. But regardless, if we want to hold to it or not, we are still held responsible because of those laws, those ordinances, those statutes was given unto us. But it all depends on who is actually going to receive it in their hearts. So again, anybody that comes through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that law that was established from the beginning has dominion over you. Let's go over here to Romans. Let's go to Romans. We're going to go to Romans chapter 7. Let's go to Romans chapter 7. And we're going to hit verse 1 and 2. Romans chapter 7, verse 1 and 2. He tells us, it says, "Know you not, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law, how that the law had dominion over a male or female, as long as he liveth? For the woman, so the spirit, which have a husband, so which have a head, is bound by the law to her husband so long as he liveth. But if the husband be dead, she, so that spirit, is loose from the law of her husband." But we know that Christ is our husband. He's our head. Because we're going to see this when we go over here to 1 Corinthians. We're going to go over here to 1 Corinthians chapter 11. He's going to tell us 1 Corinthians chapter 11, and we're going to hit verse 3. He says, "But however, I will have you know that the head of every man," so the head of every male or female, is Christ, is Jehovah. "And the head of the spirit is the male or female. And the head of Christ is God." So we know that Jehovah, Christ, the Spirit of God, is our head. He has dominion over us, and our spirit should be in subjection. And we should be in subjection to the head of us, which is Jehovah, because he's the one that has dominion over us, and he is the one that we are married to, which we're going to see when we go to Jeremiah. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 3, and we're going to hit verse 14. He tells us right here, it says, "Turn, O backsliding children, saith the Spirit of God, for I am married unto you." So we see it right there. That's who we join to. So Christ is our husband. He's the head of the house. He's the head of the body. So when we go back to Romans and we hit verse 2 again, it says, "For the woman, for the spirit which hath a husband," so we know which is Christ, "is bound by the law to her husband so long as he liveth. But if the husband be dead, she is loose from the law of her husband." So we know Christ ain't dead because he's the Spirit of God. He's everlasting and he's our husband. So we are in the position of the wife. So that means that we are bound to the law of our husband forever. So we can't get out of it. We can't be loosed from his law. Because we already seen that he ain't do away with his law, nor any of his ordinances. These things are forever. They are everlasting. So as long as he liveth, which is forever, that means we are bound to his law forever. That's why I made mention that the covenant that JEHOVAH established with our forefathers, it wasn't just for them that established an everlasting agreement. That everlasting agreement was for all of us and to all generations to come. Why? We're going to see why. That wasn't just something that was put in place for them. That was put in place for all generations to come. So we're going to see this in Psalms chapter 78, and we're going to hit verse 5. Psalms chapter 78, verse 5 down to verse 8. He tells us right here, it says, for he established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers, that they shall make them known to who? Their children, that the generation to come might know them, even the children which should be born, who shall arise and declare them to their children. Why? Because this is a continual thing, this continual covenant, this continual law that's passed down from generation to generation. Verse 7, that they might set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments, and might not be, as their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation that set not their heart aright, whose spirit was not steadfast with God. Okay, but the thing is, he's going to overturn it until he come who right it is. So, but that doesn't break the covenant. That covenant stays the same. It's just going to go through each generation. So the thing is, guess what? This right here was written before any one of us was born. So just as it pertained to them back then, it pertains to us. Everything that's written in this book pertains to us. That's why when we read in the scriptures, we must always place ourselves there and understand the purpose on why it was written, because it's for our learning. We need to understand what it is that we need to learn from it, because it was written for us. And then if we pass on, then it's going to be the same for the next generation to come. So if we conceive in our hearts, these wicked thoughts and turn our backs to JEHOVAH's law and choose for whatever reason not to follow JEHOVAH, then understand we are rejecting the very agreement that was established before we even came into this world. So it goes right back to the original issue. This is how we became corrupted. We changed from the original agreement that was established between us and JEHOVAH. And guess what? These are the things that we continually do. We constantly doing this. So we're going to see something. When we go over here to Isaiah, we're going to hit Isaiah chapter 1. Isaiah chapter 1, and we're going to hit verse 3. And then we're going to hit verse 4. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 3 and verse 4. And it says, the ox knoweth his owner, and the ass his master's crib. But Israel doeth not know. My people doeth not consider. Exactly the point. We don't consider. We don't like to meditate. We don't think. We don't like to examine things, especially the things that we should be considering. Because just as an ox knoweth his owner, they know how to get back to that master. A dang animal, a dang beast knows how to get back to where they came from. They know where they belong to. But the thing is, we sit around here with all this intellect, and we these highly intellectual people, and we can't do this. We don't know how to do this. We got all this knowledge, but we can't understand this. When JEHOVAH is our owner, he's our head, which I'm even show you how it's all tied together. Which when we go to owner, you even see it right here. Let's look. There you go. Owner, house band, the head, husband. So when we get back over here, we see it. The ox know of his owner, his head. But Israel doeth not know. We don't know who our head is. We don't consider it. My people don't consider it. That's the point. We got all this knowledge. We can't understand this. Understanding that JEHOVAH is our head. He's our husband. We belong to him. And this will never change. So we need to learn to get back to where we belong. But the thing is, we've sat there and corrupted ourselves. Verse 4, he says, Sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, a seed of offspring of evildoers, children, workers that are corrupters. They have forsaken the Spirit of God. So they have turned away. They have rejected the Spirit of God. They have provoked the Holy One of Israel to anger. They are gone away backward, because we turned away from the covenant agreement that we made with Jehovah. He fashioned us to be upright, but we turned away from that agreement. We changed from it. We corrupted ourselves with the works of our own devices. And this is why it goes right back to the heart. Why? Because the seed, which is that word, is already in us, because he wrote that law on our hearts. However, if we are not taking care of the seed by watering it with his knowledge, we sitting there and we coming up with other thoughts and imaginations that we don't conceive from within our hearts, then that seed that's in us won't germinate. It won't grow. Instead, we're going to be sitting there growing weeds, because we've allowed something else to come in and cause corruption within us. We've allowed something else to drive us away from Jehovah. Because anytime that we've sat there and thought with our own minds to do our own will, and as soon as we do that, we operate in the outside of the covenant, and that leads to corruption. But remember, all these things come from within. We're gonna go over here. We're gonna see. Let's go to Proverbs. We're gonna hit Proverbs chapter 16. Proverbs chapter 16. And we're going to hit verse 9. Watch what he's saying. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9. And it says, a man's heart deviseth his way. So we're going to look at something. Let's go to divisive. Because I just want to show what divisive is getting into. You see it right here. Divisive is tied to what? Imagine, thinketh, supposeth. We see that conjectureth, but we see imagine, thinketh, suppose. That's what devise is tied to. So, a man's heart deviseth, a man's heart imagineth his way. He thinketh his way. A man's heart imagineth his path. That's the point. But, however, the Spirit of God directeth his steps. So we see a man's heart, which we know man is flesh. So this is the desire of flesh that's going to deviseth his way. See, we'll devise our own way. We'll imagine our own way. We'll devise our own path. We'll imagine and think our own way in our own path. This is what we even spoke about before, trying to imagine our own path for ourselves based on what we want to do instead of the path and direction that Jehovah is leading us. We even brought that up last week. But how many of us actually do that? How many of us actually imagine our own path based on what we desire and imagine? Based on how we see ourselves instead of the Spirit of God actually directing our steps. Sitting there saying, I want to be like this. I want to be like that. We telling ourselves, I'm supposed to be like this. I'm supposed to be like that. I want to be in this position. I want to be in that position. How many of us actually do that? See, this is the thing. See, instead of submitting ourselves to Jehovah and appreciating how he actually made us and designed us to be, we want to establish our own path. We want to be everything else other than what we was actually made to be. We'll imagine where we want ourselves to be instead of the path that Jehovah has laid out for us. So if we relying on our own reasoning and our own will, we always going to be going our own direction. And that is going to lead to our own downfall unless we submit ourselves to Jehovah so he can direct us instead of us trying to do our own thing. Why? Because when we go over here, we're going to see. When we go over here to Jeremiah, let's go to Jeremiah chapter 17, and we're going to hit verse 5. Jeremiah chapter 17 and verse 5. And it says, thus saith the Spirit of God, cursed be the man, the male or female, that trusteth in man, and maketh flesh his arm. So he gonna make flesh his strength, and whose heart departeth from the Spirit of God. This is the point. So we have to be able to realize that at any time we sitting there trusting in our own selves and leaning to our own understandings. making choices solely based on what sounds good to us and just whatever we think makes sense to us, and we not truly relying on Jehovah's wisdom and instruction, then we are falling into corruption because we reason within ourselves, within our heart. See, the more we sitting there just trusting in ourselves, the more we separating ourselves from God, because then our hearts is towards another and not towards him. Why? Because we gonna go over here to Isaiah. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 30, and we gonna hit Isaiah chapter 30, and we gonna hit verse 1 down to verse 3. And it says, "Woe unto the rebellious children, saith the Spirit of God, that take counsel, that take guidance, advice, and direction, but not of me, and that cover with a covering, but not of my spirit, that they may add sin unto sin." Verse 2, "That walk to go down into Egypt, into the house of bondage, and have not asked at my mouth, to strengthen themselves in the strength of Pharaoh," so that king of sin, "and to trust in the shadow of Egypt," in the shadow, the image of a house of bondage. So when we sit there and do that, we'll find ourselves in bondage. We'll find ourselves in confusion of our mind. That's because we didn't seek counsel from Jehovah. We sought our own counsel. Because remember, Jehovah is our head. He's our husband. So if we making decisions and making choices without our head, then we putting our trust in our flesh. We not operating as a wife to the Spirit of God. We operating as a whore. We operating with a whore spirit. Because how we going to be married to the Spirit of God and we staying joined to our flesh too? How we going to have two husbands? That's being an adulterer. Because we not being faithful to our one husband, which is Jehovah. We still trying to kick it with our flesh, sitting there being a whore. Why? Because we have to understand that our counsel, our guidance and direction should come directly from the word, should come directly from the scripture, because Jehovah's our guide. That's who we join to. We shouldn't be joined to flesh. But provided we are continually being guided by our flesh and our own carnal ways and our own fleshly thoughts and imaginations, then we are joined to another and we are not joined to God, because we relying on our own reasoning and strength, putting our faith and belief in ourselves, seeking to fulfill our own will and not Jehovah's will. And when we do that, we are literally sitting there exalting ourselves above him. Why? Because now we think we got a better way of doing things. So guess what? He got something for us. Verse 3, "For that reason shall the strength of the king of sin be your shame, and the trust in the shadow of Egypt your confusion." Why? Because that's the image we want to be in, right? We're supposed to be in Jehovah's image. But we want to trust in the image of bondage. We don't want to be in Jehovah's image. We want to be in our own image, causing disorder, leaving us void of Jehovah's understanding, leaving us desolate and empty. This is how confusion starts, by relying on our own mind and understanding, being ruled by sin, allowing these earthly bodies to have dominion over us, keeping us in bondage to sinfulness. This leads to a corrupt mindset, because we have refused Jehovah's guidance and decided to strengthen ourselves in what we wanted to do. So we go back over here to Jeremiah chapter 17, and we'll hit verse 6. And this is what we'll look like. It says, "For he shall be like the heath in the desert, and shall not see when good cometh, but shall inhabit the parched places in the wilderness." So those dry places, those withered places, in a salt land not inhibited. Why? Because what we're going to do, this is exactly what we'll look like. I'll show it. So we see this right here. This is what it'll look like. These dry places in the wilderness. This is what it literally looks like for us to operate without the Spirit, because we're supposed to be that pleasant plant unto him. But when we operate outside his will, this is what we look like. It leaves us dry and desolate, operating without the Spirit of Jehovah leading us. It leaves us empty and barren. This is literally what trusting in flesh looks like, because this plant has no covering. It lacks moisture. It's completely naked and left exposed and weak. So at any time, And look at it. It's like a twig. You could just knock it over. You can see this. So at any time, it could be taken and broken easily because it's weak. It lacks the necessary life source it needs to actually survive. But this is us. This is us when we do these things. So when we get into situations where we get shaken up and tossed to and fro by things just going all over the place for us, and we fall victim to the pressure of the environment that we in, and we give in to our own thoughts and trust in ourselves, it's easy for us to get broken and swept away because we relying on our own selves. So when that happens, Jehovah can't fill us with his wisdom. Why? Because we full of pride. And this is what it looks like. Any of us that's thinking that we can trust in our own way, it's not going to get us anywhere. This is exactly what it leads us to corruption, to decay, being dry and withered without any life in us, leaving us completely dead and desolate, empty and void. So we're going to see one who actually put themselves in that position. We're going to see one who actually put themselves in that position. But guess what? It was by choice. But remember, when we're looking at these things, we have to always look back at ourselves. So we're going to go somewhere. We're going to go over here to 2 Chronicles. We're going to go to 2 Chronicles chapter 26. 2 Chronicles, we're going to hit chapter 26. And we're going to start right here, verse 1 to 3. 2 Chronicles chapter 26, verse 1 to 3. And it said, then all the people of Judah took Uzziah. So all the people of Judah took Uzziah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in the room of his father Amaziah. He built Eloth and restored it to Judah. After that, the king slept with his fathers. 16 years old was Uzziah when he began to reign, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was also Jecoliah of Jerusalem. So we see that this is speaking of Uzziah, the king of Judah at this time. But when we go down, we going to see later on down the line that he ended up strengthening himself in his own power, in his own might, trusting in flesh, because he didn't find true strength in Jehovah. He stopped trusting in Jehovah and decided to do what he wanted. But we can even see right here where you see, then all the people of Judah took Uzziah and made him king. So we see that. See, it don't say Jehovah made him king. It says the people did this. The people took him and made him king. But this is why we always have the problem. Why? Because our issue is we always want a fleshly king to rule over us. We always want some man to rule over us and have power over us instead of putting our trust in Jehovah. That's why you even gonna see this here. That's why you see this here when we go over here to 1 Samuel. Let's go to 1 Samuel. We're going to hit 1 Samuel chapter 8. And we're going to hit verse 7. Let's go over here. 1 Samuel chapter 8, verse 7. That's why you see it. It says, and the Spirit of God said unto Samuel, hearken unto the voice of the people and all that they say unto thee. For they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. So we know this was pertaining specifically to Saul, but this same thing still applies anytime when we sit there and we decide to appoint these fleshly kings over us. Then we get what we get. This is what happens when we relying on our own thoughts and reasoning. We want to have these men in power, putting our trust in the shadow of Egypt, in the house of bondage, because we want to serve flesh. We want to serve men. That's why we can see when we get back over here to 2 Chronicles, we see the people. Then all the people of Judah took Uzziah, who was 16 years old, and made him king. People did this. Why? Because this is what the people wanted. That's what they wanted. See, Jehovah is supposed to be our king. He's supposed to be our ruler. Why? Because we're going to see some things. Let's go over here to Psalms. Because we're going to get into what happened with Uzziah, but we just showing here that, see, but this is what we want. This is what we like to do. But we see this in Psalms chapter 89 and verse 18. He tells us in Psalms chapter 89, verse 18, it says, For the Spirit of God is our defense, and the Holy One of Israel is our king. We see that right there. So now let's go to Psalms chapter 118. And we're going to hit Psalms chapter 118. We're going to hit verse 8 and verse 9. Because he's making it clear to us on what we're supposed to be doing. It says, it is better to trust in the Spirit of God than to put confidence in man. It is better to trust in the Spirit of God than to put confidence in princes. So we see that there. Because our trust, our belief, our hope should be in the Spirit of God, not in man, not in flesh, but what? We want flesh to rule over us. That's why we have the problem. And we're going to hit one more in Acts. He tells us in Acts chapter 5, we hit, is this Romans? Yeah. So we're going to hit Acts chapter 5, and we're going to hit verse 29. And it tells us, it says, then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. So we can clearly see this, the evidence of this here. See, Jehovah is our God. He's the one that's ruler over us. That's who we are to obey. Why? Because man is going to lie. Man is going to fail you every time. But once again, what we like to do, we like to sit here and rely on our own thoughts and conceive in our own hearts and conjure up what we want to do. And then we end up having all these fleshly kings because of this corruption that's found within our hearts. See, we did that. And Most High didn't do that. We did that. We wanted these kings over us because we want a man in front of us that we can see. We wanted that. That's what we wanted. We desired that. So he gives us what we truly desire in our hearts. And that reveals what we're really about. Guess what? Hey, this just came to me, so I'm going to go and show that, hey, this is where this actually first started. I'm going to go right over here. The Exodus chapter 20. We're going to go to Exodus chapter 20. We're going to see this right here. This is exactly why we do this. In Exodus chapter 20, we're going to hit verse 18 and 19. It says, and all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. And they said unto Moses, speak thou with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. That's the point. We don't want to hear the voice of God. We want a man in front of us. We want somebody that we can look at, and that's what we want. See, we constantly doing the same thing. Why? Because we want flesh. We want flesh to speak with. That's what we want. See, this is what we do. This is why we have these issues. So this is how we get into all these problems, because of the things that we want to do. We want something that we can see. We want something that's in our image to put our trust in, rather the spirit who's we supposed to be in the image of. We want to put our trust in something that we can see. But that's why I say it ain't nothing new under the sun. So we can't just talk about them back then. Why? Because we continually doing the same things today. Why? We can see it. We see it all the time. What we do? We worrying about who the next president going to be. We worrying about who going to be ruling the country. We worrying about who we can put our trust in. We out here idolizing these celebrities, exalting these famous men, putting these famous preachers and these false pastors on high levels and pedestals. See, they ain't no different from these kings that keep us in bondage. When Jehovah's supposed to be our king, supposed to be our ruler, who has given us everything that we need being our guide, but that's not enough for us. But we allow these fleshly kings to have authority over us when we put our trust in them, which that actually reveals what's really in our hearts. So he gives us exactly what we want. That's why he said, hearken unto the voice of the people, because that's what we want to do. That actually exposes the corruption that's in our hearts. It's showing that we rejecting God. It's showing that we got a rebellious spirit. Because once we get that king that we want, it always going to turn out bad. Why you think every time we get these fleshly kings that we always go into bondage? We always end up getting into more confusion. Just like you have people out here putting all their trust in Martin Luther King. And all that man did was just destroy us, deceive us, and make us docile. But guess what? Our people still love him. This is what we do. Putting faith in flesh, which is already corrupted. And we seen that from the beginning in Genesis. So how can something that is corrupt save you? Can somebody answer that? Why do we put our trust in flesh? We know flesh is corrupt. We seen that. So why do we put our trust in something that's corrupt? How can something that's corrupt save you? When hey, we flesh, I'm flesh, flesh is corrupted. Why would you put your trust and belief in something that is corrupted? That's subjected to be destroyed. It's going to decay. Why would we put our trust in that? Why is this the things that we do? Make it make sense. This is why we have so much of a problem. So, back over here, 2 Chronicles chapter 26, starting back at verse 3 to 5. 2 Chronicles 26, verse 3 to 5. And it says, 16 years old was Uzziah when he began to reign, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was also Jecoliah of Jerusalem. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Spirit of God, according to all that his father Amaziah did. So he sought God in the days of Zechariah, who had understanding in the visions of God. And as long as he sought the Spirit of God, God made him to prosper. See, that was the key right there. As long as he sought the Spirit of God, God made him to prosper. As long as his desire stayed towards JEHOVAH, God made him to prosper, not himself making himself to prosper. God made him to prosper. That was the point. But guess what? He stopped doing that. And he went and started trusting in himself, in his own strength. And this is the problem. Soon as he got powerful, soon as he got strong, soon as he felt like he was strong on his own, he stopped putting his trust in JEHOVAH. But this is exactly what happens even to us when we allow our hearts to get lifted up, when we get puffed it up thinking we all this and all that. Now we don't need God no more. Then we start doing things according to how we want to do it. And that right there is the beginning of a downfall. Matter of fact, I'm going to go right to it so I can even show right here. Just to prove real quick, this is what he did. Because when we go down to verse 16, 2 Chronicles 26:16, it says, but when he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction, for he transgressed against the Spirit of God, his God. So we see it. I just jumped down ahead of time because I was speaking on it, but I needed to make sure I actually showed it. So we see that's what he did. Once he got to the point where he thought he was strong, he was powerful, he done did all this. Now he don't need God no more. But that right there, when we get puffed up like that, when we exalt ourselves like that, that is the beginning of one's downfall. Because what we have to understand is that we have to truly remain humble and always continue to seek the Spirit of God always in all things. We have to be mindful of how we conducting ourselves. Why? Because the thing is, it said, we see it right here in verse 4. He did which was right in the sight of the Spirit of God. See, just because we do something right in the sight of the Spirit of God, that don't mean anything if you don't continue to do it. If you don't continue to be faithful, if you don't stay steadfast in it, we can do something right, but if we don't stay doing that, then what does that mean? What profit is it? See, that's why we can have so much of the problem. And see how the scripture just came to me. So let me see. I'm gonna see if I can just pull it real quick. That's even pertaining to what I was saying. You see right here. Yep. We're gonna go right over here to Ezekiel. Let's go right over here to Ezekiel. We're gonna hit Ezekiel chapter 33. We're gonna hit Ezekiel chapter 33. And we're gonna hit verse 18. Ezekiel 33, verse 18. He tells us right here. And it says, Ezekiel 33 and 18. And it says, when the righteous turneth away from his righteousness and commit acts of sin, he shall even die thereby. He gonna be separated thereby. So it's letting us know right there. Okay, if we do something right in the sight of the Spirit of God, we have to continue to do right. We have to continue to stay steadfast and faithful to Jehovah. We can't sit there, because as soon as we turn from that, then guess what? Now we gonna end up separating ourselves from God, because we sitting there and we not being steadfast and being faithful to Jehovah. This is why it's so much of a problem. So that's the point I wanted to make. When we don't stay steadfast in it, we don't continue to be faithful, when we sit there and we get puffed up and we get lifted up. So we're going to go over here to Sirach, or Ecclesiasticus. Sirach, or Ecclesiasticus, chapter 3. Sirach chapter 3 and verse 18. We're going to hit Sirach chapter 3 and verse 18. He tell us right here. Sirach chapter 3 verse 18. It says, the greater thou art. So the greater thou in your perfection and beauty, the more humble thyself, and thou shalt find favor before the Lord. So the greater you are, so the more knowledge that we receive, the more wisdom and understanding that we gain, the stronger that we get in our understanding, the more humble that we should be. So we have to continue to submit ourselves to Jehovah's will. And to do this, we have to continue to resist this flesh. But this is exactly why a lot of us have the problem. Why? Because as soon as we gain a little knowledge on something, as soon as we start becoming successful and prosperous, as soon as we think we done did something right in the sight of the Lord, and we might become popular, now all of a sudden we get puffed up. Now we start acting out. Now we start showing ourselves. Now we think we the best thing walking around. Now we know everything. Now you can't tell us nothing. This is exactly what happens. And it happens like clockwork. We do exactly the opposite of the counsel that's actually given unto us in the scripture. Because that's what the scriptures are for. It's for reproof, correction, and instruction in the ways of righteousness. See, we have to understand we can't just know scripture. We can't just know what the book say. We got to be living the book. It's not just written for us to just read it and just quote it. We have to become it. We have to be applying the things that we actually learning. And it should be showing in our works, because that seed is supposed to germinate and grow within us, because that law was written on our hearts. So with gained wisdom, we shall also grow in humility, because we need that cup empty, because the more we humble ourselves, the more Jehovah can continue to fill us up. But instead, we do the exact opposite. Why? Because of our heart. It's always going to go back to the heart, because of our heart. See, that seed that should be growing in us, it can't grow. It can't take root. Why? Because we have allowed ourselves to be influenced by sin to corrupt our hearts and our minds. And these are the things that happen. So instead of continually being filled by Jehovah's knowledge with understanding and discernment, instead we being filled with pride and a self-exalted mindset, which without a doubt leads to a downfall, which we're going to see it tell us in Proverbs. Let's look at it. It says Proverbs chapter 16, and he tell us in verse 18. Tell it right here. Proverbs 16 verse 18. It says, pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. It's right there. That's exactly what's going to happen. And we're going to go to Sirach. Yep, Sirach chapter 1. And we're going to hit verse 30. And it says, exalt not thyself, lest thou fall, and bring dishonor upon thy soul. So bring shame upon thy soul. And so God discovered our secrets. Why? Because he's going to reveal what's actually in our hearts, and cast thee down in the midst of the congregation, in the midst of the assembly, because thou camest not in truth to the fear, to the desire of the Lord, but thy heart is full of deceit. We see it. This is exactly what happens. This self-exaltation of one's own thoughts and reasoning. These are the things that we really have to watch out for. Why? Because we can't get sleep, caught sleep. Because as soon as we exalt our own thoughts over Jehovah, we actually putting ourselves over him. Because we'll exalt ourselves over the word of God. Why? Because we thinking with our own thoughts, our own imaginations, what we want to do. We exalting ourselves because we think we good enough to stand alone. And we ain't never good enough to stand without Jehovah's guidance. Because there ain't never going to be a time when we can operate in the right way without the Spirit. We'll never be able to operate right without the Spirit. Or where we think we know enough to operate without Jehovah being our lead, being our guide. But as soon as we think we can do things better in a way that we want to do it, as soon as we think that, as soon as we get powerful, as soon as we start to increase and get to a certain level, that's when this arrogance sits in. That's when it starts to sit in. And we think we can do things in a way that we want to do it. This is how we fall, especially when you have these men. You have these men with these titles, just as you've seen with this king right here. We see Uzziah, he was a king. He has this title. Now all of a sudden he's puffed up. You can't tell him nothing. But guess what? That same exact thing applies to us, that we have to understand about ourselves. So it don't matter if it's an elder, an evangelist, a deacon, a brother, a sister. A title means nothing if it is not held in humility. If we do not conduct ourselves with humility and righteousness, a title is vain. It means nothing, providing we lifting ourselves up by our own power. Those titles can be taken away. Why? Because God is not a respecter of persons. He is not a respecter of flesh. Why? Because he's going to hold us all accountable for our actions. It don't matter who you are and the works that we do. Just like we finna see right here with this Uzziah. Because he thought since he was a king, he thought since he was in this position of power and he held that title, he could just do things however he wanted to do. Okay, so let's see it. Let's see what happened. We back over here. 2 Chronicles chapter 26. We're going to hit verse 16 and we're going to take it all the way down to 21. 1 Chronicles chapter 26, verse 16 down to 21. 1 Chronicles chapter 26, verse 16 down to 21. And we're going to see it right here. It tells us. But when he was strong, this is Uzziah, when he was strong, his heart, so his desire, his mind, his understanding was lifted up to his destruction. For he transgressed against the Spirit of God, his guide, and went into the temple of the Spirit of God to burn incense upon the altar of incense of these confessions. Verse 17, and Azariah, the priest, so this is the intercessor. So this priest, Azariah, the priest, went in after him, and with him 80 priests of the Spirit of God that were valiant men. So we can see right here that this Azariah and these priests are valiant men. These are men of strength and bravery, but it's in the Spirit of God. That's the difference. These priests are men of God. Notice something. These men, Azariah, this priest, he's not in the position. He's not in the king position. See, the people, remember back up here in verse 1. Then all the people of Judah took Uzziah, who was 16 years old, and made him king. This is what the people did. But understand, back down here, Azariah, this priest that went after him, and these 80 priests, they not in a king position. The people wanted the king ruling over them. So they chose Uzziah. But these men of God right here, these priests, they not ruling over the people as kings. They being servants of the Most High. Hopefully we seeing a difference on what's going on. See, these priests have spiritual authority given unto them by the Spirit of God between God and man, because they're intercessors between God and man. Not as Uzziah, who was ruling with fleshly dominance. See, this is the difference on what's going on. Verse 18, it says, and they withstood Uzziah the king and said unto him, it appertaineth not unto thee, Uzziah, to burn incense unto the Spirit of God, but to the priests, the sons of Aaron, that are consecrated, that are hallowed, that are sanctified to burn incense. Go out of the sanctuary, for thou hast trespassed. neither shall it be for thine honor from the Spirit of God. So we can see here that Uzziah is trying to operate in the office of the priests, in the office of the Levites. See, this is why we even spoke on last week, understanding what our role and positioning is within the body, understanding the different administrations. See, the priest office, it don't pertain to him. It only pertained to those who were sanctified, separated, and truly dedicated to JEHOVAH, which are these Levites, the ones that JEHOVAH set apart unto himself. But Uzziah is basically sitting there going outside of his lane. He didn't stay in his lane. He trying to do something that he wasn't ordained to do. That's why I said at the beginning of teaching, we get lifted up and say, oh, I'm going to go do this. That wasn't for you to do. He trying to perform the duty of the Levite by burning incense, offering up these confessions of the people, and it's not his duty nor his position to do so. But we're going to see why this was actually revealing what was truly in his heart. Verse 19, he tells us, then Uzziah was wroth. So he was angry. He was furious and had a censer in his hand. So in his power to burn incense, which we even going to see when we go over here to censer. It tells us exactly what it is. It tells you censer is what? True love, true desires, desire container. For clarification, which holds the hot coals of what is really burning in your heart, good or bad. So we see this censer is this true love, these desires. It's gonna show what's exactly in our heart. This is what we bring it. It's gonna be either good or bad. That's what that censer is. So this is what he brought. This is what was actually burning in his heart, his desire. And we see it right here. And while he was wroth, he's showing he's revealing what's actually in his heart. While he was wroth with the priest, watch this. What happened? The leprosy even rose up in his forehead before the priest in the house of the Spirit of God from beside the incense altar. Verse 20, and Azariah, the chief priest, and all the priests looked upon him, and behold, remember, he was leprous in his forehead. So he was leprous in his understandings, in his mind, and they thrust him out from thence. Yea, himself hasted also to go out. Shoot, hell, he trying to get out himself, because the Spirit of God had smitten him. So we see this. So we see that this was the recompense and the punishment for his actions, becoming leprous, showing that spiritual corruption, showing that uncleanness, which was in his forehead. So we know if it's in his forehead, it's in his understanding. It's in his mind. It's corrupted. His mind corrupted, which is his heart. This is what we've been talking about the entire time. The corruption of the heart by exalting oneself. So we see how the corruption that can consume one when you sitting there seeking your own desires outside of the will of the Most High. This is what happens when we sit there and operate in pride and arrogancy. When we try to exalt ourselves above God. See, when we go back up here to verse 5, it tells us, as long as he sought the Spirit of God, God made him to prosper. We can't just do that. It's simple, but we can't do it. We want to turn around and do our own thing based on what we want to do. We try to exalt ourselves above the word of God, trusting in our own strength. See, those true desires are going to be revealed from his heart. And guess what? It was revealed, and he was struck with that plague of leprosy, that spiritual corruption of one's mind, being consumed in decay and filthiness. This divine punishment that came upon him. He tells us in verse 21, and Uzziah, the king, was a leper unto the day of his death, and dwelt in a several house, being a leper, for he was cut off from the house of the Spirit of God. Yeah, he got cut off. He dead. He's separated from God. And Jotham, his son, was over the king's house, judging, teaching the people in the land. So this is what happened. That pride that goeth before destruction. That's why you see back over here. Pride goeth before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. This is what happens. This is what happens when we sit in here operating with this haughty spirit. See, this reminds us of the repercussions of being exalted by our own self. This self-exaltation, turning our hearts away from JEHOVAH and seeking our own will, making us corrupt. Because it don't matter how high up we are. We can always be brought low. We can always be brought down. See, this is why we have to always be mindful of everything that we do and how we move on everything, because we have to remember that we are only flesh, meaning we have limitations. See, flesh is always susceptible to temptation and our own fleshly ways of thinking, which could lead us to destruction if we allow it to happen. If we don't resist it, we'll end up in spiritual decay. And then once we end up in that spiritual decay, it's going to steady eat away at us, just eating away at us, eating away at us, eating away at us, eating away at us, which it can happen in a moment or it can happen over time, because it's just like yeast. It's just like yeast or leaven. It rises over time. See, it might start small, but it eventually grows. It eventually becomes full and swollen, or even as weeds that grow in a garden. The same thing can happen to us when we allow this sin to grow in our hearts and take hold of our hearts. We allow evil thoughts to grow because it's going to do nothing but get worse and worse and worse and worse. This is what happens. So when we go over here, the Ecclesiasticus, we go to Ecclesiastes chapter 10. We're going to hit Ecclesiastes chapter 10, and we're going to hit verse 12 and verse 13. Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 12 and verse 13. He says what? The beginning of pride is when one departeth from God, and his heart is turned away from his maker. So the beginning of pride is when one depart from God, is when one leave off from God. So when we sit there and we learn knowledge and we grow in understanding and we get stronger in the wisdom that is given unto us, God's going to make us prosper. But guess what? Soon as we feel like we don't need to do certain things, soon as we feel like we don't need to study as much and we get slack in our studies, then that's when pride sets in. Now guess what? Now we don't depart from God and our hearts begin to become corrupted. Every day that we go without studying the word of God, meditating, or even in prayer, the more we allowing corruption to sit in. We sit there and think we got enough knowledge, then believe that we can go off on our own and do our own thing however we want to do it. Guess what? Corruption will sit in. Think about that. See, we might not think too much of it, but slowly, when we go days and days and days and days and days without doing the things we supposed to do and putting in the work like we should, we being filled with that leaven. We being filled with that sin, that pride, and that corruption, because it only takes a little bit. That's why he say a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump, because all it takes is that little wicked thought, that little wickedness that can creep into our mind. Then we start dwelling on it, allowing it to grow within us. Now, before you know it, we're in a state of spiritual decay, all because of the uncleanness of our hearts. Because once that pride is found in us and we don't get rid of it, it will be our downfall. This is what happens. Verse 13, for pride is the beginning of the sin, and he that have it shall pour out abomination. Because that's all we're going to be pouring out. Why? Because that's all that's going to be in our cup. And therefore, the Creator brought upon them strange calamities. So these strange sufferings, these strange plagues, these strange afflictions, and overthrew them utterly. This is what happens. These sufferings, these plagues, these pestilences, these diseases, these sicknesses, even in the physical and spiritual, these strange things can start happening to us. And then we sit there and act like we don't know what's going on, wondering why we can't get healed, not realizing that these spiritual conditions, these curses that come upon us is the price of our disobedience due to our pride that's found within our hearts, leading to our own downfall. Same thing as we seen with Uzziah, leaving us dead and decayed. This is what happens. So we're going to hit verse 11. Sirach chapter 10, verse 11. Tell us, he says, for when a male or female is dead, so when a male or female is separated from God, he shall inherit creeping things, beasts, and worms. Which we're going to even see. When we end up separated from God, when a male or female is separated from God, we see right here. I'll show you. We see what creeping things is. What? Creeping thing is tied to what? Corruption, infirmity, weaknesses. We already see worm. So all these things tied together. These creeping things, these worms is tied to infirmities, weaknesses, iniquity, lowless, serpent, caterpillar, thing, corruption. This is what it's tied to. We see it. Decay, judgment, and punishment. This is what all this is. This is what happens. When we end up separated from God because of our pride, this is the things that we inherit that eat away at us. And I'm going to show y'all something. See, I won't go show it, but I am going to show it because I want us to get a physical visual of what this actually looks like. See, now, if anybody got any kids or anything, I wouldn't, I'm just saying, because this, what I'm about to show can be actually pretty disturbing. So I will remove the kids from the room, or if you eating, I will stop eating. I'm just letting y'all know straight up right now. I will stop eating and I will remove the kids from the room because what we about to see is actually really disturbing. But we gonna see exactly what this looks like and what this is. So we see this right here. This is what we looking at. When a man is dead, he shall inherit creeping things, beasts, and worms. But we understand, we see this, but we looking at it spiritually, because these creeping things are these infirmities. These are these weaknesses, this corruption, this decay, these worms, this corrosion, this decay that's constantly eating away at us. It's just like a dead body physically, which we looking at on the screen. When flesh physically dies, the body decays over time. It begins to stink, it begins to decompose, and is eaten away by worms, bugs, and other creeping things. But when we see it spiritually, this is the same thing that happens to us when we become spiritually separated from God. That spiritual condition, those infirmities start eating away at us. It starts eating away at our mind. Those sicknesses and diseases of the mind start consuming our desires and our thoughts, leading to continual spiritual decay. These are the things that will happen, provided we allow our own mind and our own thoughts to become exalted. This is what pride does to us. Pride puts us right in this position right here. So don't look at the physical body. No, think about it spiritually. Think about that decay, that corrosion, that's those sicknesses and diseases of the mind that constantly eat away at us. This is what happens when we be lifted up in our pride, not realizing we think we're doing something, but we actually preparing ourselves for our own downfall. But this is why we have to stop thinking with our own mind, because that's what it's going to lead to. See, we can't have no mind. We have a whole bunch of different minds, and we shouldn't think like that. We have a whole bunch of different thoughts, and this is what we shouldn't be doing. So what we need to do, we want to be able to turn this around so we don't fall into this trap. We don't fall into this pitfall of destruction. See, in order for us to do this, we have to think with the mind of Christ and not with our own mind. So we're going to go somewhere. Well, actually, we're going back over here to Jeremiah. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 17. Jeremiah chapter 17, and we're going to hit verse 7 and verse 8. Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 7, verse 8. And it says, "Blessed, wisdom is given, is the male or female that trusteth in the Spirit of God, whose hope the Spirit of God is." Verse 8, "For he shall be as compared a tree planted by the waters, that spreadeth out her roots by the river, and shall not see when heat cometh." She's not going to see that burning, that intense suffering. "But her leaf shall be green," because it's going to be full of life and growth, "and shall not be careful in the year of drought, in the year of famine and decay, neither shall cease from yielding fruits, from yielding works." This is exactly what should be happening. So now we got to see an example of this. We got to see an example what this looks like. So we're going to go over here. Now let's go to Genesis. Let's go to Genesis chapter 41, because these are examples that we should be following. Let's go to Genesis chapter 41, and we're going to hit verse 54 to 56. Genesis 41, 54 to 56. And it says, "And the 7 years of Derith," so this Derith is famine, is when we in want. "The 7 years of famine began to come, according as Joseph has said. And the famine was in all the lands, But in all the land of Egypt, there was bread. So there was knowledge. There was doctrine. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried out unto Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, so the ones that's in bondage, go unto Joseph. What he saith to you, do. And the famine was over all the face of the earth. And Joseph opened all the storehouses. So he opened all the barns, the vessels prepared for knowledge, and sold unto the Egyptians. And the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. So we have to remember, though Joseph was in the house of bondage, he was not in bondage spiritually, in his mind, not in his heart. See, though there was a famine in the land, he had plenty of bread. He had plenty of knowledge and understanding. Why? Because he wasn't in want. That's why you even see this here when we go over here to Psalms. We go to Psalms chapter 23. We're just gonna hit verse 1. Psalms 23 verse 1. He's doing this right here. It says, "The Spirit of God is my shepherd. I shall not want." He's not gonna be lack. He's not gonna be in need. That's why we see it. Joseph wasn't lack. He wasn't in need. Why? Because same as him. If we truly hold to JEHOVAH, then we'll never be in want. We'll never be in lack. It'll never be famine to us. But it was to the Egyptians because they was in flesh. But we have to see it for what it is. Don't just look at Egyptians for Egyptians. We need to understand that these Egyptians are people in bondage. We're not looking at physical Egyptians. These are people that's in bondage, that's bound to their flesh. This is a lot of us. When we caught in this famine by lacking knowledge of JEHOVAH because we don't want to hearken unto it. So let's go over here to Amos. Because we gonna see something over here in Amos chapter 8. We're gonna hit Amos chapter 8 and we're gonna hit verse 11. Amos chapter 8, verse 11. And it tells you, "Behold, remember, the days come, saith the Lord God, that I will send a famine in the land." So I'm going to send a famine in the people. Not a famine of bread, so not a famine of knowledge, nor for a thirst of water, nor for a thirst of understanding. But watch this. But of hearing the words of the Spirit of God, but of hearkening, but of taking heed to the words of the Spirit of God. Why? Because those are the only ones that's going to be in that famine, that's lacking, that's in need, that's in hunger. The ones that refuse to hearken to the words of the Spirit of God. See, it's not like JEHOVAH's knowledge and his wisdom isn't attainable. It's not that. But when we refuse to hearken to JEHOVAH, we'll end up in a famine because we lack an understanding. But Joseph had knowledge in the famine. He had bread and corn stored up. But this is exactly the same thing that we're supposed to be doing so that famine doesn't come into us. We have to make sure that we have doctrine in our storehouses just as he had bread in the storehouses. See, our temples should be stored up. That's why we see this over here in Malachi. Let's go to Malachi. Let me see. Let's go to Malachi chapter 3. Let's go to Malachi chapter 3 and verse 10. He tells you, Malachi chapter 3, verse 10, it says, "Bring ye all the tithes, the portions into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house. There may be doctrine in mine house." He tell you, this is JEHOVAH speaking. So he said doctrine in mine house. So in his temple, which is our bodies, "And prove me now herewith, said the Spirit of God of hosts, providing I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing or giving a knowledge that there should not be room enough to receive it." So he tells us. So our storehouse, our temple should always be filled with the doctrine of God. And that's providing we being true, faithful servants unto him. Then he will continually feed us. He's going to make us to prosper as long as we keep our heart's desire towards him. And he's going to pour out these blessings of wisdom. But the famine is to those that reject JEHOVAH, whose heart are hardened unto his way, who don't hearken unto his ways. So when we get back over here, the Genesis, we're going to go Genesis chapter 41 and verse 57. And he tell you, all the countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn. So they bought corn. So corn is what? Fruit, it's bread, it's abundance and provision because the famine was so sore in all lands. So Joseph had the abundance and provision from Jehovah because Jehovah made him to prosper in the land of Egypt. That's why that's why this same thing applies when we go to back to Second Chronicles, chapter 26. How did that do that? So when we go back over here to Second Chronicles, chapter 26, and you see in verse 5, and as long as he sought the Spirit of God, God made him to prosper. That same thing applies. See, this applies to all of us as long as we seek Jehovah truly with our hearts, and he will make us to prosper. But we can even see this today. This is why we come to learn. This is why we come here, KJBU, in the house of the lost sheep of Israel, to learn. So we can buy freely. We can buy this knowledge freely. This bread, this manna, this corn, this abundance and provision. Because before that, we was in a famine. We was lacking knowledge and provision. We was Egyptians. Each and every single one of us was Egyptians because we was in bondage. So this is why we gather together so we can receive this knowledge that we need from these storehouses. Because all these other places and countries that we come from, when we were sitting in those churches and those camps and in these other philosophies and in these other doctrines, there was famine. There was a lack of substance for our spiritual nourishment. So we come here so we can learn and receive the abundance of truth from the word of God. This is something that we should be doing continually. So we can see that this is something that actually continually happened with Joseph. Because even though he was full of knowledge, he still remained humble and never exalted himself. So that's why it goes right back over to Sirach. If I can go back to it. Sirach chapter 3. Yep, here it go. The greater thou art, the greater in your perfection and beauty, the more humble thyself, so thou shalt find favor in the presence of the Creator. Exactly what was going on. Because we can even see what happened when we go over here to Genesis. Well, we already in Genesis. Well, we go to Genesis chapter 50. We're gonna hit verse. We're gonna see how he did this. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 50 and we're going to hit verse 17 down to 21. He tells us right here. It says, so shall ye say unto Joseph, forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren and their sin, for they did unto thee evil. And now we pray thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. And Joseph wept when they spake unto him. Verse 18, and his brethren also went and fell down before his face. And they said, remember, we be thy servants. And Joseph said unto them, fear not, for am I in the place of God? He ain't God. What you want me to do? But as for you, ye thought evil against me. But watch this. But God meant it unto good to bring it to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. That was the whole point. Verse 21, now for that reason, fear ye not. I will nourish you. He's telling you, I'm going to feed you. I'm going to edify you. I'm going to instruct you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. Humility. So we can see clearly right here on what happened. This was the purpose of Joseph being brought into Egypt, to preserve much people alive. Not because of what his brothers did. That was just a part of the process. Because even in that, even when he was sold off and cast into prison, Joseph continued to remain humble and faithful to Jehovah and never turned from that, and was lifted up in the house of bondage, but still remained humble and kept his faith towards Jehovah. So this is why no matter the situation or position that we are in, we must always keep our faith and our trust in Jehovah and never allow our thoughts and our hearts to become exalted at any time. Why? Because go right here to Isaiah. He going to tell us in Isaiah chapter 55. In Isaiah chapter 55. Isaiah chapter 55. And we're going to hit verse 8 and verse 9. He said, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Spirit of God. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Jeremiah 29 and 11. Jeremiah 29 and 11. He says, for I know the the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Spirit of God. Thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. So this is why we should never lift up our own thoughts. So at no time should we ever rely or lean on our own understandings. This is why we stress the importance of this. Because a lot of times to us, our circumstances and situations can appear overbearing. It seems challenging and tempting to make hasty decisions and choices based on what we're thinking or how we feeling or the positions that we are placed in. But we have to always remember who it is that's guiding us. So we can't think with our own mind. We have to have that mind of Christ guiding us, just as Joseph. That's why he said, for I know thoughts that I think towards you, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. That's why we see when we get back over here to Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, we see it right here. But God meant it unto good to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive, because that was the purpose behind it. It's always a purpose behind everything that we experience. So we have to apply these same things to our own lives and realize when we draw closer to God, even in that darkness, we going to face many unknown things. But even in that, we have to consider the purpose that's behind everything. Because that's why we look back at Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, said the Spirit of God, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. So we have to be willing to completely and 100% follow God blindly. That's why we see this right here. That's why we see this right here in Isaiah chapter 42. Isaiah chapter 42 and verse 16. He telling us exactly what he gonna do. He said, and I will bring the blind by the way that they knew not, and I will lead them into paths that they have not known, and I will make darkness light before them and crooked things straight. These things will I do unto them and not forsake them. So when we resist this flesh, when we resist our own thoughts and our own reasoning and our own will, then Jehovah can lead us. Because then we fully trusting in him blindly. We have to come to him without our own mind so he can lead and direct us, even in uncertainty. But if we truly trusting in him, then he'll make our path straight. He'll make that uncertainty, that darkness into light, into illumination, giving us clarity and purpose on what we need to be doing. Because now we operating with the mind of Christ, not with the mind of man, of flesh, because that word, his spirit, can fully be that influence on us to do what we need to do. So let's go over here to 1 Corinthians. We're going to go to 1 Corinthians. We're going to go 1 Corinthians chapter 2. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, and we're going to hit, let me see, we're going to hit 12 down to 16. He says, now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the spirit which is of God, that we might know the things that are freely given unto us of God, which things also we speak, not in the words which man's wisdom teacheth, but which the Holy Ghost teacheth, that separated body teacheth, comparing spiritual things with spiritual. Verse 14, but the natural man, the flesh, receiving not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. But he that is spiritual judgeth all things, yet he himself is taught of no man. Why? Because we're not being taught by flesh. For who have known the mind of the Lord, that he may instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. That's exactly what we need. And that's exactly how we have to be operating. Let's go to Philippians. We're going to Philippians. Let's hit Philippians chapter 3. Philippians chapter 3, verse 15. He tell you, let us therefore, as many as be perfect, thus be minded. And if provided in anything ye be otherwise minded, God shall reveal even this unto you. Yes, because if we don't have our own mind and our hearts are fully towards Jehovah, walking in that clearness, then that's the way we should go. But if we be otherwise minded, God even going to reveal this unto you. Why? Because if it's something else, then there's cracks, there's holes. Then these things he's going to reveal unto us. Why? Because it's something else that was found in our heart. Which, that's why I say it's going to keep going back to the heart. That's why we got to continually check ourselves. That's why I go back to Jeremiah chapter 17. Jeremiah chapter 17. Now we're going to hit verse 9. He says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? So that's the question. He's asking us, who gonna know it? Because you have a lot of people out there that like to say all the time, oh, God knows their heart. Oh, God knows my heart. But then fail to understand that it's telling us right here, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Our fleshly hearts are wicked. See, we don't even know our own hearts, because if we truly knew what was deep in our hearts, then we wouldn't need those things to be revealed unto us. We wouldn't need to receive the truth if we knew what was actually in our hearts by ourselves. But guess what? We do. We don't even truly know ourselves until JEHOVAH actually shows us ourselves. But then once things are actually revealed unto us, the issues that happen with that, we tend to get prideful. We don't want to accept it for what it actually is. Why? Because we lean into our own thoughts. We allowing that corruption to sit in rather than accepting what it is that we need to know about ourselves so we can be healed from it. See, this is what a true servant of Christ would do. Not sit there and try to strive with the truth and deny what's really in their hearts. We should seek for our hearts to be revealed unto us, those deep things made known to us, so we can acknowledge that and seek guidance on how to be cleansed from that. Because how else can we truly get closer to God if we don't go through this process? If we afraid to draw closer, how else we gonna do it? Let's go somewhere. Let's go to Psalms. We're going to go over here. Let's go to Psalms. Let's go to Psalms chapter 139. We're going to hit Psalms chapter 139, and we're going to hit verse 23 and verse 24. Psalms 139, verse 23, verse 24. And it says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me. So examine me, prove me, and know my thoughts. Verse 24, and see if there be any wicked way in me. That's the point. And lead me in the way of everlasting. So we see what he's saying. Why you think David is petitioning this? Why you think he's doing this? Guess what? He was a king too. But he wasn't operating under carnal dominion and strength. He's operating understanding that JEHOVAH's in dominion, showcasing his humility, being a servant, a man after God's heart and not his own. Matter of fact, I want to show that. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go over here to Acts so we can even see what we even talking about. With Acts chapter 33. Acts chapter 13 and verse 22. He tell you Acts chapter 13 verse 22, and it says, and when he had removed him, he raised up unto them David, the spirit of God's beloved, to be their king, to whom he also gave testimony and said, I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart, which shall fulfill all my will. So we see once Saul was removed out the way, that fleshly king, David was brought up, a man after God's heart. Not his own. David, he not after his heart. He after JEHOVAH's heart, which is going to fulfill JEHOVAH's will, not his own will. So that's why we see right here, because he's asking JEHOVAH to search him out, to see if there's any wickedness in him. Look at what he's doing. Search me, oh God, know my heart, try me, know my thoughts, and see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way of everlasting. Because provided we are truly seeking to be cleansed from any corruption within our hearts, we would do this. If we are truly seeking to be cleansed from any corruption within our hearts, we would do this exact thing. And honestly, with honesty, we would seek JEHOVAH on this exact thing right here. But how many of us are actually going to do this? How many of us will do this? See, that's the thing. We need to answer that within ourselves. Will we actually do this? See, this right here, it reminded me of a statement that a brother made. Brother Dwight. It was Brother Dwight that actually made his statement. He made a statement a while ago in one of his lessons that he did. And it really pricked me. And it stuck out to me. It stuck with me. And I'm going to tell you exactly what he said. He said, don't be afraid of what you find when looking in the mirror. Be afraid of staying that way. That's a statement he made. I'm gonna tell you, when that brother made that statement, I just sat right there and I was like, let me write that. I gotta write this down. Because that just stuck out to me. Because it was so true. Because why? Why would we be afraid to find what we find within us? These things being revealed unto us for who we really are. Why would we be afraid of that? See, at least then we can see what it is. Accept it for what it is. Acknowledge it. And seek to get rid of it. Yeah, it might hurt. It might be painful. But it's necessary for growth. But this is a constant thing we have to be doing every day. We have to continually search out these things daily. But if we don't even want to see it, we don't even want to see what the issues are, we don't even want to take that step and finding out if there's any corruption within us, then we can't move forward. We can't do nothing. That's when we should be afraid. We should be afraid of staying that way. Just like that brother said. Or even worse, if we found out and we don't confess it. We don't bring it before God. So it's better to get these things worked out now than it to manifest itself and lead to our own downfall. That's why he tells us something in 2nd Esdras. Let's look at it. Let's look at 2nd Esdras. 2nd Esdras, chapter 16. And we're going to hit, let's see. I'm going to hit verse 62 down to 64. 2nd Esdras, chapter 16, verse 62 down to 64. And it says, yea, and the Spirit of God Almighty, which made all things, searcheth out all hidden things in the secrets of the earth. Surely he knoweth your inventions, and what you think in your hearts, even them that sin and would hide that sin. Therefore have the Lord exactly search out all your works, and he will put you all to shame. So this is what we don't want to happen. So again, I really appreciate that brother for making that statement, because this is real. This ain't no game. So we got to be real with ourselves, and we got to be honest with ourselves and be real with our salvation that we saying we seeking. So we have to be led of the Spirit in everything that we do. And this has to be a pure influence that freely flows through us. That's why we can see this in Romans. Let's go over here. We'll try to go ahead and move through this. So let's go to Romans chapter 8. We're going to hit verse 13, 14. It says, for if providing you live after the flesh, ye shall die. But if ye through the Spirit do mortify the deeds of the body, you shall live. For as many are as led by the Spirit of God are servants of God. So we can clearly see, in order to kill these works of the flesh, it has to be done through the Spirit, not by our own will, by the knowledge of God given unto us, by doing his will and submitting ourselves unto him. Because we already know when we go over here to Job, he tell us in Job chapter 32, and we're going to hit verse 8, he tells us, but there is a spirit in man, and the inspiration of the Almighty giveth them understanding. So we see that it's only by the Spirit of God that we receive understanding, by his influence and persuasion on us. We cannot be led by our own thoughts and our own ways of thinking, because we already know when we go to Proverbs, we're going to go to Proverbs chapter 16, Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 25. It says, there is a way that seemeth right unto a male or female, but the end thereof are the ways of death. So there is a way that seemeth right to us, but the end thereof is the ways of death, a separation from God. See, there's a lot of things that we can do and believe that appears right to us, but that does not mean that it's right, because that's our own thoughts. If we sit in there leaning to what we think, what we feel is right, then we lean into our own understanding. We not being influenced by the Spirit, and we going to end up corrupting ourselves. So at any time we making decisions and choices based on our own thoughts and desires, then we haven't mortified the deeds of the body. We still holding the flesh. We still exalting ourselves over Jehovah, because it's impossible to be truly led of the Spirit and walk in the Spirit if we still lean into our own thoughts and desires too. Because it's only through Jehovah that we can truly do any good. Because we're going to see in Sirach, he tell us, Ecclesiastes, Sirach, chapter 11, Sirach chapter 11, verse 15, he tell you, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of the law are of the Lord. Love and the way of good works are from him. So this all comes from God, and through his Spirit is the only way that we can do any of these things. Why? He tell us in John. Let's go to John chapter 15. John chapter 15, verse 5. He tell you, I am the vine, I am the path. This is Jehovah. You are the branches. So we the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit, much works. For without me, you can do nothing. So this is the point. Without Jehovah, without the Spirit of Jehovah, without the pure influence from the Almighty leading and directing us, we can't do nothing. Nothing that we will do will be of any effect, providing we sitting there thinking we can do things and achieve things of our own strength and might and ability. When he's making it clear unto us, if we want to live in the Spirit and walk in the Spirit and kill this flesh, it has to be done through Jehovah's influence upon us, through the knowledge that he's given us, through the truth that we receive, and not through our own power. It can't be through anything we say we doing. But that's why we end up with a lot of issues, because a lot of times we like to try and figure things out on our own. We have a habit of saying, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I'm going to make this correction. I'm going to make that correction. I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to stop doing that. Okay, that's fine. You saying that. But if we're going to keep saying what we're going to do something about, then we must truly understand that any correction that needs to be made in our lives, it's not something that can be achieved merely by our own efforts. Understand this. It's through Jehovah's will. It has to be through him leading us and doing his will, not us just merely saying what we're going to do. So any changes that needs to be made in our life, we have to be bringing those things to God, bringing those things to Jehovah, seeking guidance on what needs to be done to make those necessary changes in our lives. And that is done through his will, not us just merely saying we're going to do something. Hopefully all of this makes sense. See, this is how we stop leaning to our flesh. This is how we stop leaning to our own understanding. This is how we stop getting caught up in the flesh, by not sitting there thinking we can just get up and do things by our own power. So every situation, every matter, rather small or great, it doesn't matter. We have to lean upon Jehovah for everything, providing we seek to produce these good works and be that flower, or be that plant, or be that tree that's flourishing as we was made to be. Because anything outside of that, any other way that we're going to come up with is going to be of none effect. It's going to be void of righteousness, because we sat there and decided to do something based on what we thought was right, because we exalted ourselves based on what seemed right to us. But then it don't work out like we want it to. This is exactly how a lot of us end up in this trap. This is how a lot of us end up getting caught up in the corruption of this world, because we don't remain in Jehovah and continue in his way. Verse 6, if a man abide not in me, he is cast forth as a branch and is withered, and men gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burnt. Verse 7, providing you abide in me and my words abide in you, and ye shall ask what you will, it shall be done unto you. Exactly the point. Because as long as we stay in the word of God, that word is what gives us the things that we need, and it helps us prosper in his way. But all of this is done through his will, because his will should be our will. So let's go over here. We're going to hit John right here. We're going to hit John chapter 14. John chapter 14 and verse 14. It says, providing you ask, you shall ask anything in my way, I will do it. So we see this here. This is why I said anything we need, anything we seek or desire or request should be in Jehovah's way, that his will be done. Not our own will, but his will. See, many of us seek knowledge. Many of us seek truth, but do we seek it in the way that we want to do it, or in the way that we actually should? You have people that believe, oh, I can just pray to God, or he's going to give me understanding. You have people that believe that, oh, I can just read the Bible with no understanding. but I can just read the Bible for myself, then he's going to make me understand it. You have many people that do this, and neither of these ways are proper ways of learning. That's just following our own thoughts. We corrupting ourselves by doing that when the scriptures make it clear unto us. When we go over here, we're going to hit Romans chapter 10. Romans chapter 10 and verse 14, it says, how then shall they call upon him who they have not believed? And how they should believe in him who they have not heard? How shall they hear without a preacher? Jeremiah chapter 3 and verse 15. It tell you, and I will give you pastors according to mine heart, which shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. So Jehovah gives us feeders, which shall feed us with his word to nourish us and sustain us. He's going to provide teachers unto us to feed us with his understanding. So this is how we can acquire knowledge and understanding of the scriptures and properly learn how to go throughout the Bible to understand it by way of the teachers that Jehovah has provided unto us. Not us just sitting there thinking we're going to get the understanding another way. So providing we lack understanding, we have to learn how to ask so we can receive understanding. Not us just sitting there thinking we just going to get the understanding through our own power and it's just going to come to us. That's a fleshly mindset. Thinking we just going to gather wisdom by our own thinking. No, we got to learn to ask questions. And those of us who still showing that we doing this, we still tied up in fleshly ways of thinking. We being lifted up in our own thoughts because we trying to lean to our own way. We sit there and say, well, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I ain't going to say nothing. I get it eventually. It'll come to me eventually. I ain't going to say nothing. I'll get it later. And guess what? We ain't going to get nothing. Because why? We lifted up in our pride. We'll sit there and know we struggling on something, or we might even lack knowledge on something that we need to know and how to apply to our life. But we'll talk ourselves out of asking the question. Why? Because of pride, thinking we got a better way of doing it. See, that seemed right to us, but that don't make it right. But this is why we can have so many issues. So we're going to jump down. I'm going to go over here to Galatians. I'm going to hit Galatians. I'm going to hit Galatians chapter 6, chapter 3. Galatians chapter 6 and verse 3. Galatians chapter 6 and verse 3. And it says, for if a man thinketh himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceiveth himself. And this is exactly why we have the problem. We can't sit there and get big-headed and thinking we all this and all that. We got everything to say about everything, and we think we know everything. We got it all figured out, thinking ourselves to be something when we're nothing. We have to understand without the vine, without the path, which is the way of Jehovah, without him, we are nothing. We are just a plot of dirt. But we'll sit there and think that we more than what we are, thinking we can do things on our own. See, that's why we could have so much of the problem. And that's why we could have so much of the issue. And these are the things that we should not be doing. So I only got a few more scriptures left, but let me see. Just going to finish this out. So I'm going to go over here. So we'll go to, shoot. I'm going to tell you what. Yeah, so we hit Genesis chapter 2 and verse 20. Because this is the pattern that we have to break. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 20, and it says, and Adam gave ways to all the cattle and to the fowl of the air and to every beast of the field. But for Adam, there was not found a help meet for him. Why? Because we have to understand that Adam didn't seek Jehovah's guidance. See, they was given wisdom because Jehovah blessed them, but they never sought the guidance on how to actually apply the wisdom that they were given. See, thinking you got it all figured out, thinking he's something when he's nothing, deceiving himself, just as a lot of us will do. See, we'll receive blessings, we'll receive wisdom and knowledge and understanding from the word of God, but once we get it, we think that's good enough and go about our own business. Then we don't actually seek out how to use the things that we've been given. We won't actually seek out guidance and instruction on how to actually apply the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that we've been given. We'll just get it and go our way. We don't meditate on it. We don't do anything. Don't even seek out what we even supposed to be doing with it. See, these are the things. This is why we can have so much of an issue. We don't sit there, how do I apply this? These are the things we should be doing. How can I apply this? How do I go about doing this lesson or this study? How can I go about doing this? We don't do this. We'll sit there and be given wisdom. Then all of a sudden, we think we know everything. We think we understand everything. Then we can just go and do whatever. That's why you see Adam was giving ways to all the cattle, to the fowls and the beasts of the field. These are people, but this is what we do. We'll sit there and go around telling everybody about themselves and telling everybody else what they need to be doing, pointing the finger at everybody else and got everything to say about everything and everybody else, but lacking the necessary understanding on how to apply the very wisdom that he was given to apply it to his own life and seek out actually how to do so. Tell me online. Tell me this is what we don't. Tell me we don't do this. Because when they received the Spirit, they rejected it. We sat there and learned of the knowledge of good and evil, going after mixed doctrine. That quick, showing you how easy it is to fall into corruption based on following our own desires and not seeking Jehovah's will, because we didn't have any guidance or direction. We'll just walk our own way. But that's by choice, because we choose that. When we decide not to seek spiritual guidance and counsel, we sitting there. We'll be giving gifts, talents, skills, and abilities. Each and every single one of us have these things. But then we'll sit there and say, well, I want to do this and I want to do that. Oh, but I don't know how to go about doing it. Yeah, because you won't ask. We won't seek guidance. So we'll sit there and let it go to waste because we won't get out our own way and seek guidance on what we're trying to figure out. So how do we actually expect to fulfill what we need to do and Jehovah's will if we don't actually seek out the proper guidance and ask how do we go about doing what we need to do? It's something we need to consider and ask ourselves. Is this something we actually doing, or do we tend to still lean to our own mindset? So I'm going to pull this last verse because I'm already over the time. So I'm going to go to Proverbs chapter 3. I'm going to hit Proverbs chapter 3, and I'm going to hit verse 5. Down to verse 7. And he tell you right here, it says what? Trust in the Spirit of God with all thine heart, and lean not to thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Be not wise in thy own understandings. Fear, desire the Spirit of God, and depart from evil. Depart from corruption. Depart from works of the flesh. So this is what we need to do. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this teaching right here. Yeah, hey, I got caught and, it is what it is. But, we can always pick this up next week. But hopefully with that, we got some understanding from this lesson, from this teaching that went out. Understanding that we have to be able to trust in the Spirit of God always and never lean to our own understanding. We have to keep our minds toward God and his will be done in our lives. We cannot allow these things to escape our mind, but we must always hold to the truth and always seek growth. Always check ourselves. Always look within ourselves and seek to understand if there's anything within us that must be cleansed and removed. This is what we want to understand. We can't be caught lifting up our own hearts and our own minds, lifting up our own thoughts, because our lives are in Jehovah's power. We have to remember that. So the closer we draw to him, the closer he draws to us. So we want to make sure that that pure influence for the Spirit is what motivates us and keeps us encouraged and directed and guided in the right path, which give us our purpose and our reason in all things that we seek pertaining to the kingdom of God and his righteousness. So with that, I appreciate everyone for coming out and tuning in with me in this lesson. This was Deacon Ernest James with the King James Bible University, Durham, North Carolina. And I would like to say, Shalom.